everybody, it's Drybear. There are a bunch of leaks and discoveries around Monster Hunter Wilds, which we know is coming in February, and the hype has just been building and building. But if you're someone that wants to go in completely blind into Wilds, this is going to be your warning, your spoiler warning now. It is going to be a lot of legwork from the community, as well as speculation from myself and others, talking about what will be coming in the game and what the focus of the game is going to be, based on what we've seen so far, but it could be spoilers for you if you're someone that wanted to go in blind. So if you played the Wilds beta, you're probably like me and are getting crazy withdrawals by now because it felt so amazing to play. There's definitely a lot more to discover about the game. We played one zone with several regions, and we only had 4 total large monsters to hunt and chase down. And you got a lot of time with our friend here, Ray Dow, but we know there's going to be a lot more to the game. And there's also questions about, after release of Wilds, what comes next, right? Like, what are we going to get as far as the super end game monsters? What's the core story of the game? And are we going to get to see maybe some more black dragons? I'm hoping to see a lot more legendary monsters coming into the mix. But let's go over all of the leaks and discussions that have been going over the game so you know what's coming and also what to be prepared for. Now, the first thing to talk about is going to be the general focus for the game, right? Because we know in Worlds, it was the focus of Elder Dragons. The whole concept of World was going to the Elder's Recess, seeing the migration and change in pattern of the Elder Dragons, and we had a huge focus on Elder Dragons. And we've already got confirmation from Capcom that they don't intend to have a major focus on Elder Dragons. It's not confirmed yet, as far as I know, that there won't be any Elder Dragons inside of Wilds to start with, but it's not going to be the big focus that we saw in World. So what is going to be the focus? There's a lot of theories about this, but there's some recent data mining over the last couple days that show that something is going to be a little bit more focused than others. And that is, there is a ton of data mining, things available that didn't get scrubbed out of the Wilds open beta, that make references to 2 major components. The first one is swarms. We actually saw this a lot inside of the initial zone that we saw in the beta. There were cases where many monsters would gather up and move together as a group, and their overall population would fluctuate. So we have this idea of swarms and population of swarms changing. And the next thing to think about is going to be the frenzy status. This shows up not only in the area of environment, but also the status of monsters, and there's also a classification of monsters as well. They have 3 classifications of monsters in the database right now, at least in the Wilds beta, that show normal versions of monsters, frenzy versions of monsters, and legendary. So we had obviously like low rank, high rank, master rank, but legendary is showing up as a designation for monsters as well as frenzy. Now, there's 2 things to talk about when it comes to this frenzy state, and I actually believe, at least in my own speculation, that this is going to be the main driving force, the story element of Wilds to begin with. There is the frenzy virus that comes from Gore Magala and his other forms, as well as something that I want to talk about from another Monster Hunter game that we'll get to in a minute. But this is the intro ecology scene for Gore Magala in Rise, and if you've never fought Gore Magala before, it is a blind monster that spreads his scales all over the place, but also comes with a virus called the Frenzy virus. It's this purple mist and smoke that can infect both hunters and monsters, and it causes them to go completely nuts. They get incredibly strong, incredibly fast, and crazy aggressive. Which is kind of like the Rage virus in 28 Days Later in that whole series. The idea that it just causes people to go utterly berserk and just start raging on people, and gives them crazy strength, tapping into all their available strength and musculature to just drive everything to a crazy conclusion. And genuinely, I think that this is going to be the main story element of Wilds, at least for their opening chapter. Their focus on this is going to be the idea that the Frenzy virus is spreading. It is causing these monsters to go crazy. Not only is it giving frenzy to these monsters, but it's also causing swarms and definitely different ecological events to happen. We know there's a big focus on weather events, changes in weather, changes in these patterns, and causing these monsters to go crazy. And the other reason I think this is because if you ever played Monster Hunter Stories 2, this was kind of the same idea. There was a rage-inducing effect that was being applied to monsters outside in the ecology that was changing everything. And basically, you would fight these normal versions of monsters or the rage-induced versions of monsters. This is not them going enraged, but a virus that's infecting them and causing them to go crazy. And in their enraged form, where they start glowing pink, they start glowing purple, and changing into that perspective, it completely changes their fight. And the idea of Monster Hunter Stories 2 was that these little hits, these changes in the environment were popping up, and if monsters were ever infected with this same kind of status ailment, they would go nuts and just start destroying everything in their path at all reckless abandon and cause damage beyond what they would normally would, and take fights they normally wouldn't as well, to just cause chaos and destruction in all directions. So I think this is actually going to be the focus here. Now, whether this is the frenzy virus specifically from Gore Magala, or if it's from some other source, I think this is going to be the main story development or driving story element that we're going to see in Monster Hunter Wilds. And it's something that has been discussed and shown a lot with all of the Magala infestations or like incarnations, right? Gore Magala we know we've seen a good amount of, and then Shigaru Magala is definitely something we've seen a lot of as well, starting in 4th gen and moving on from that. And we have seen some signs and interactions between the effects that Gore Magala can have, but I think this is going to be like a big exploration into what the frenzy virus can do and how it can affect the environment overall. And again, in the database, they do mention normal monsters, frenzy monsters, and legendary monsters. And I hope that this is a brand new classification. This could just be Wild's version of Arc Tempered, so that it has like a harder version of these monsters that you have to fight at the end, but it also could mean a return to form on some of the older monsters, like some of the black dragons we haven't seen. We know we got Fatalis, we also go to Latrion, but there are other like crazy, insane level threats that exist that haven't shown up in, at least in 5th gen, that we've seen so far. There's also a lot of references to extinct species in the data mining that we've seen so far. This is a completely different representation than elder dragons or a different classification, and it's not just one monster. They have mentioned that Arkveld, the premier monster that we're seeing on the launch of Wilds, is an extinct species, and this is something that they talk a lot about in the trailers and the dialogue we've seen from the characters so far, that Arkveld was a species that existed long ago, but went extinct. They haven't seen it in a very long time. We did see this a little bit with Velkhana in Iceborne, this return of a monster that was thought to be extinct, but there is a lot of reference in the database around monsters that were confirmed to be extinct. They did not exist anymore. They were wiped out. They haven't shown up anymore, and they've confirmed that they're gone, but they're showing back up again. So this could be a combination of the frenzy virus plus something else that is causing these extinct species to come back to life or come back into the ecology, and the impact of those monsters reappearing in the current state and what they'll do to change the environment around them. There's also a bunch of leaks around the monster classifications inside the database, like the actual DB that they're seeing for the new monsters coming in. We're seeing a return of a lot of very well-known monsters from Gen 5 and Gen 4 and a couple even from Gen 3 that are coming into this and being shown, but there's also some new classifications that we would like to see explored more that we think is going to be explored a lot in Wilds. We're seeing a lot more Leviathans than usual, when I think this is probably inspired. They had done earlier this year, or maybe last year, a poll for figuring out what people's favorite monsters were, and it actually turned out that Lagiacrus became one of the more popular monsters across the world, and even especially inside of Japan, there was a big reaction to Lagiacrus and the Leviathan class monsters that are the underwater style monsters. And I think even with Namiel showing up in World and even Mizutsune coming back in Rise was a big thing for people. So having more water style or even underwater style monsters, as long as the hip check master doesn't come back, I think is going to be really cool for this kind of buildup. And we had Almudron as well for like that kind of style, but it wasn't full all the way into the Lagiacrus kind of style monsters. Some of that coming back I think is going to be really cool. And what's even cooler than that is they're adding new classifications that I don't think have existed before. We saw the trailer from 2 weeks ago that they showed off the octopus-like black flame monster, which was this like multiple tentacled monster that showed up and started spewing fire and had oil covered everywhere. We know there's going to be a zone that is called the oil well basin, which you can see depicted here, where you get stuck in these big oil fields, which might have some interaction with flames and lava and oil appearing in different areas. And they also showed off the black flame monster. However, we found the black flame monster in the DB files as an individual monster, and on top of that, the classification that the Black Flame belongs to has other DB entries that are under the same classification. So it's very possible that the Black Flame is not going to be the only octopus-style monster, but there will actually be several inside of that same classification, which is being listed as cephalopod right now, which is kind of an understatement there. But I think it also kind of shows a little bit that they're expanding out that idea. And I think that a monster like this that has many different limbs that shows up as a hard monster or even has a legendary version of it is going to create a lot of really cool interactions with some of the weapon types, some of the encounters that we have, and the fighting styles that we need to fight these kind of monsters that do have, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 different limbs and these tentacles that can interact with us in new ways. There was also some data mining that went over the weather effects. We know that there is a sandstorm, because we saw that a lot in the plains that we started in as our first map. But there is also a heavy rain weather effect, a heat wave weather effect, and a blizzard weather effect that has shown up in the same area in the same entry style as the sandstorm that we saw there as well, which we know that there's going to be something involving like cool drinks and hot drinks, which we saw in many Monster Hunter games, where if you go into an area that's too hot or an area that's too cold, you have to make sure that you maintain yourself. But it looks like there's going to be these freak weather events, like a crazy blizzard rolls in, you can't see anything and everything's freezing over, or a heat wave rolls in, you can't see, it's distorting your vision and you're melting and things like that. So that's going to go alongside the same idea as the sandstorm, as well as heavy rain, which we know is going to bring in one of the new water monsters that has already been revealed. So they can combine together the frenzy virus from Gore Magala, or some kind of pathogen / virus that spreads between the monsters, causing them to go absolutely nuts, the weather effects that go on, the possibility of swarms of monsters as well, and the sprawling areas that we've seen inside of Monster Hunter Wilds for the opening beta. I think it's going to create a crazy fun environment that is unlike any other Monster Hunter we've ever played before, that creates some really, really unique experiences. I also want to talk about the data mined locales that are in the database files as well. So what I have listed here are the ones that showed up inside of the database on top of that. So we know Windward Plains is the one we've been playing on. It's the one that we fought in the beta, that sort of thing. They had also previewed the Scarlet Forest when they showed off some of like Scylla and Ursula and things like that, and some of the different areas in there. And we know that they also trailered 2 weeks ago the Oil Well Basin. So this is the like half volcanic, half oil slick, oil tar pit style zone. But inside of the database files, next to these 3 locales are 2 new locales called the Wall in the database and Core in the database. And there's also a wall boss fight. Now, if you look at things like Zora Magdaros or crazy big boss battles like we saw in Rise, where you have to jump around and try and like fight something that's way bigger than you, you definitely have the idea that this could be a wall boss fight, like you're standing on a wall, or it could be that the boss itself is a wall. This is like a Final Fantasy style wall boss fight, where it's like a big entrenched monster that can't move and you're stuck on it that way. And this idea of the core is super interesting too, because this could be something that's deep inside the earth, or this could be something that's like more of a ground zero, site zero kind of thing. It could be that maybe Core is the center of this frenzy virus outbreak that's causing all kinds of problems. Like I said, in Monster Hunter Stories 2, there was a source, an original area, and without, I mean, the game's old, so it's not like there's going to be crazy spoilers, but the story direction in that game was definitely that there was a source, a cause of this outbreak, and maybe the idea of these extinct species returning in Monster Hunter Wilds combined with the outbreak of this frenzied state or frenzied virus fits together, and there's some original source, and maybe that is the core, which is kind of what I'm believing here as is going to be the ultimate result of that game, that the core is the site zero of whatever caused this event to happen. And we know that the weather effects could be caused by monsters. It's not unheard of. In fact, it's very normal for a lot of elder dragons or the legendary monsters to cause changes in weather, changes in ecology. And in fact, a lot of what Iceborne was about monsters causing crazy shifts in the way the world works. I mean, tectonic plates moving, weather changes, everything. You can bet your butt that this is caused by a monster and not just something naturally occurring. But let me know what you think about all this stuff and everything that's been coming out about Monster Hunter Wilds, and whether you are someone that's super excited about what's coming. I'll leave a link down below to the Monster Hunter Leaks Reddit, where a lot of people have been discovering the game code as well as anything that wasn't scrubbed from the beta, and has been putting forth a lot of the data or DB entries that we've been talking about in this video, so you can see where the posts have come from. And that is going to be it for the video. But let me know what you think about these leaks for Monster Hunter Wilds. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.